internet was never kind to women. I had to stop using Twitter because I would say something and I would get rape and death threats.
I'm actually writing a book about the sex lives of Muslim women. I was raised in a very, very conservative family. And then I was like, okay, I'm so self-taught. And a lot of people don't have like really basic information about sex. I was like, I have to write something about it. Like, this is outrageous.
If you're siding with anybody else and if you're siding with X party, you cannot be part of something.
Wherever you're listening or watching, wherever you've stumbled across this podcast, it would be great if you could like and subscribe or follow if my content resonates with you. So I'm super excited for you to be here because I feel like you're one woman who broke the taboo around saying the word bitch in Pakistan 20 years ago. So that was definitely ahead of our time. And would you start off by introducing yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Rabeeya. I created Soul Bitches about 8 years ago, and I'm really excited to be on this podcast to discuss a little bit backstory and currently what's happening with Soul Bitches.
I'd start off by asking, why Soul Bitches? How was the name born?
I think that's like the most asked question since I've started Soul Bitches, but it just really came from the fact that I was constantly called a bitch, like I think majority of my life, and it's one of those things where you just start embracing certain characteristics of who you are. And I know people said it in a mean way or were trying to hurt me in a lot of ways, but I took it in a way that I felt confident in who I was. And just because I said no or didn't want to do something or my beliefs were different than theirs and I stood up for certain things that I wanted to do or I believed in, that just kind of what the word bitch really came from. Or like if a woman was in a high power move or like they did something, it was constantly like, oh, that woman has to be a bitch or that woman is this. And it just became kind of like a woman is a bitch if they say no, or if they're in these like certain roles where they have the power to say yes or no. And I think that because women are supposed to be nurturing, women are supposed to be mother figures, women are supposed to be kind. And if a woman was anything but that, they were a bitch. And that kind of, I mean, sure, I am excuse me, I am a kind person, but that doesn't mean I'm going to say yes to everything. And I think that's where it really came from, where I was like, fine, I'm sure we're bitches. Like, what are you going to do about it? So that's really what it came from. It obviously wasn't something that I thought it would go as far as it has today. So I made it just to kind of see what, when you're just like kind of dipping your toes into the water, you're like, how is this going to work? And especially somewhere like Pakistan, you're like, you're going to be called the resident bitch now. And it was just something that I was like, yeah, so what? And it was so great to have.
How old were you? How old were you when you started the group?
Oh my God, it was in 2016, so 8 years ago. So I was 22 because I'm 30 right now. So 22.
So just for those who don't know, Soul Bitches is a private Facebook group. It was born in Pakistan. It was run in Pakistan. And the internet in Pakistan is not so feminist and not so inclusive, especially it wasn't back then. So for a group to hold its footing for so many years, it was a huge deal. Also, the fact that bitches was not censored in any way. There were no omissions in the word, and it stayed in its original form. Mm-hmm. And that was quite a feat. And Rabeeya created that group. So more power. How many followers did it have before it was recently taken down?
Approximately 33,000. So as you mentioned, it was private, so we would have these like checks and balances within the group, and obviously as you grow it becomes harder and harder, and it became to a point that I think it just became really hard to kind of like, especially when I moved to Toronto with the time difference and my work schedule and trying to live a completely different life, it became really hard to do. And I'm not sure why Facebook actually took it down, but a lot of people are saying because people were selling a lot on the group, which was, I mean, in my opinion, it's completely fine if you want to sell your shirt or you want to sell anything or you have a small business. That's why that group was created. But I think that that's really what happened, and Facebook deleted it.
Is that though? Is that why the group was created? I feel like it was created to give women a voice where women could talk and unite. And I mean, Facebook Marketplace did not really exist at the time. So
Yeah,
this was a recent development, I'm guessing.
Yes, so that's really, Facebook Marketplace wasn't there at that point, but I think that why it really was created, there were so many reasons, right? Like there were reasons where women needed a safe space, and I felt like I could create that space because fortunately I in a lot of ways had a safe space because I had my siblings and I had some people that I could talk to, and I saw that people over there, women lack that, especially being South Asian, being from Pakistan. There were certain things that in our culture we weren't allowed to talk about, even certain things like abuse, mental health, or even asking certain sexual questions that they weren't allowed to ask that. I found that there needed to be that space. There needed to be that education kind of standpoint, but not just for that. I feel like women should be able to be themselves, right? Women should be able to start their businesses. Women should be able to sell what they want to. And like you mentioned, like internet was never kind to women. Like I said, the whole bitch thing, when they are starting their own business or wanting to do things, like, you have to be a certain type of person. You have to be that aggressive human being in Pakistan. You can't be like the nice guys going about, because people will walk all over you. People will manipulate you. And I think that like there were so many women who kind of felt the same way, but had no idea that they were feeling the same way. And I kind of wanted to create a space where I was uniting different people from different places.
What was the most discussed topic on the group?
That's a tough one because there were so many discussions that happened, and when it started, I think it was people were just having so much fun, and honestly, it made me so happy to see women in a positive limelight and women just being supportive of each other, or being like, oh, I've just started like my Instagram thing, can you please go follow me, and like go comment, and people would become friends, and then they would have like these like go outside of Soul Bitches, meet up, and like a lot of friendships were formed. Zonanos is a really good story. Like she started selling her oil on Soul Bitches, her grandma's oil, and then it took off to what it is. And it started on Soul Bitches. There's so many things. So it wasn't like one specific topic, but it was multitudes of things because, again, women weren't able to express themselves outside. So when it came, when you would go on it, it was, when we looked at like the analytics, 90% of people were active on Soul Bitches, which is insane to see that, to see those numbers. And when I first started out, I just was shocked. I didn't expect it to turn into that, because I thought it would be like frowned upon.
Right. And how did the group become popular? Like, how did you market it that a group like that exists? Did you go and post it on any other group?
No, I never marketed it. That's the crazy part, is that's how I actually started my digital marketing career, and how I realized that social media actually has a voice if it's used right, and if it's used in a way that you'd want it to, that you could honestly create something word of mouth and make it exclusive and make it valuable, right? And I never marketed it. I just told my friends, and I was like, hey, I started this because of X, Y, and Z reason. And it just became like that person would add that person and that person. It was like anything like happens in Karachi, right? Like anything that the word of mouth is really powerful back home. So like when that happened, it just kind of was like a rippling effect. The only time I posted it was like on my status when we used to do status updates. That's when I was like, yeah, I've created this group and it's gonna talk about all these things, and it kind of just took off from there. And of course it was a women's only group, which was like a big deal, because it was like, why aren't we invited? And it's like, because you don't need to be invited everywhere. So it became kind of like, one of those like sanctuaries where you go there, and it's so sad to know that when it got deleted, there's so many people are missing it, and they're like, we really miss it. And you don't think about these things, right? I'm like, okay, if it's gone, who will think about it, right? It's just a Facebook group now, because the internet is so far ahead of their time today. Like you can kind of search anything, you can say whatever, you can anonymously post. You have that freedom a lot more than you had before. That's when I started reaching out to Facebook again, because I started getting all these messages saying that we really miss that. I feel like it's time to really try, and I've been of course, like been messaging Facebook.
When was it taken down exactly?
I want to say 2 months ago. I don't remember the exact date, but I have a friend who's in Facebook who helped me actually bring back the group twice, and I just messaged him recently.
In the past?
Yeah.
In the past. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then I messaged him, I think like 2 weeks ago, and I'm like, please help me again. And I felt so bad, but I tried like the traditional route where I appealed, I reached out, and there was nothing. There hasn't been any word from Facebook.
I mean, we'll come back to the fact that it's been taken down in a moment, but when the group started, it was a private group.
Yes.
Why was it private?
I think it was because like I just didn't want everyone there, and I didn't want men there. That was our biggest thing. I know with public groups you can still join and it's still requests, but I think when you're private, it still holds that value of like not everyone can be there, because it's really hard to make these decisions, because there are people who screenshot on the group. There are people who allow men to go through it, and I know that, and I have witnessed it myself. I have heard people talk about it, and they were of course removed from the group. But I'm not just saying like anybody. I've heard my own friends like, oh, I showed my husband this post, and obviously for me, I'm like, you can't do that. Like my husband like has never seen Soul Bitches, has no idea what goes on. And
really?
Yeah.
You've never discussed anything from the group? I mean, considering a lot of people are anonymous.
Yeah, I don't just, because it's not for him. It's not about him. He's a man. Like at the end of the day, like I'm not discussing women's problem with somebody unless like someone was like, hey, I'm okay with it, or hey, I'm okay with discussing it. He has no idea. I mean, he obviously knows what Soul Bitches is and what it's about, and of course, like being a person who's considered a man hater, which has always been the case, like in Pakistan, like it would always be a joke that like, oh, don't do anything to Rabeeya, she's gonna post it on Soul Bitches, like, and it was just like, it's really not about that. Like,
I mean, it's a hell of a reputation to have.
Yeah.
Don't do anything to her, she's gonna post it on Soul Bitches. I had a bit of such reputation myself, not for posting it on Soul Bitches, but like, she's gonna take it to Twitter. And I feel so happy, like if people feel like you're a person with a voice, you know, you're gonna go to the ends of the earth to get justice, or you know, if people act unfairly with you. And I feel like that's such a huge check mark, you know, in the plus column. What are some conversations in Pakistan that don't really have a space? And when you created that group, you realized just how big of a vacuum you had filled by creating it.
I mean, the most prominent one was definitely sexual health. I don't think like sex ed, for example, like was not taught. Like the questions that were asked, of course I would not repeat them, but there's certain questions that we read, it was so worrisome that they were just basic knowledge that women didn't have or women didn't know. In our culture, you can't have sex before marriage, correct? So no parent or no one's teaching you as you go into puberty, as you grow up or develop these like feelings, you get your period as a woman. I know that there were so many women who just got their period but had no idea what was happening to them, that because parents were like not talking to them about these things, or like talking about what safe sex is, or what is going to happen. So a lot of people who wanted to were not prepped for certain situations. And of course, like when you say something like that, or like these questions are asked you, or like how can you be okay with this, or how can you have a space where, you know, you're saying these things or you're teaching them. And it's one of those things where it's like, well, do you want your child to get like diseases? Do you want your child to be pregnant? Do you want these things to happen to your child? Like, obviously not, right? So there are certain things that you need to teach your kids, and the questions anonymously were of course asked, or like, you know, certain things, and then you see that there's such a big gap in what we know and what we're taught. So that was a really big step that we took. And of course we knew that when we are saying these things, or are pro LGBTQ or pro certain things that just were so against.
Really? Was there pro LGBTQ conversations
Yes.
on the
Yeah.
group, even 8 years ago.
Yep.
Right.
They
And
were
how did you filter it out? What
in
was the
terms.
filter mechanism? Like what to post, what post to approve? Um, what
We
were
didn't go
what?
through approval process. Anyone you could post anything, really. It
Ah,
was never. Yeah, it was never. We never wanted people to feel like there were, of course, rules. Rules had to be made after certain points because it became a lot, and it was obviously volunteer work. It was not like I was getting paid to do certain things or paid to be part of something. And my sister, like she was with me in the start. Her and I did it, and then we of course grew to having this like great group of women. We have Zainab, Shifa, Homera. Like these girls were integral for keeping all these like rules and regulations, and they did it voluntarily. They did it part of, as a side quest. Like I never compensated them for it. They never asked. They wanted to be part of it. And at certain points, obviously, it took over like our lives. I don't think people realize what a taxing, emotionally taxing job that is to sit and approve people. Once I remember there were 10,000 people requested, and we had to deny all of them because we just were like, at this point, the group cannot handle more of a more I don't want to say crowd, but more of an influx of people, because we're still trying to have quality, because we want to create a safe space. So the more people you add, the more it becomes unsafe, and the more we were hearing that people were screenshotting, the more we were hearing people were discussing it outside the groups, and those were things that we needed to control first before we kept being selfish in a way, right? Because in a way that the more people came, the more popular we were. And that's not what I wanted the group to be. I didn't want it to be a popularity contest. I didn't want to be like, I have 100,000 women. I wanted to be a person where it's like, I have a team who can now handle the 100,000 people, and I have a team that I can trust, and I know that, and then I can pay them. And at that point, obviously, I wasn't working. I wasn't monetizing this. I didn't have the money. Now I'm in Toronto, so the time difference. So it became even harder and harder. You can tell, like, when there is kind of a lack of what the group, what people start to say, or what people feel like they have the right to say. So I think it became a very like hard thing to like be like, okay, do we turn the approval post on? How do we filter it out? But we never ended up taking that route, because we still don't want to make people feel like we have the right to approve what they say. I don't think that's fair, because I will have different opinions than other people. I will have that, irrespective of them being in my group or not. They're not going to believe everything I believe. And that's not fair.
questions about sex on the group. I came across them as well for a long time. I followed the group for a long time, but it's just difficult to remember every single detail because, I mean, there was also Soul Sisters, so they have an approval process for every post. So I was confused. But I'm actually writing a book about the sex lives of Muslim women. And I feel like these Facebook groups were what helped me solidify the focus of my book, because I also come from a Muslim background. I was also raised in Karachi, and I was raised in a very, very conservative family. And that's also like a thing. If you're in an environment that's not teaching you all these things, it just becomes really hard. And then I was like, okay, I'm so self-taught, and a lot of people don't have like really basic information about sex. And I was like, I have to write something about it. Like, this is outrageous. And I do think that Soul Bitches and Soul Sisters played a really big role. Soul Bitches as well. I want to keep this super respectful, but I'm curious, how was this group different from Soul Sisters? Because Soul Sisters was another really, still is, a big group of its time, and it gave women like a similar platform to come out and talk about what's happening, and a lot of people started counting on these groups to share, and a lot of people were members of both. So in your opinion, how was Soul Bitches different from this group, just objectively?
I feel like today it's a very different route. I think there's no real difference, right? I think that I will always support women, and I will never say things like, oh, I'm different because of this, or she's different because of this. Like, it's not. I think we both have a similar agenda, and I think we maybe have different ways of going about things, which is fine. I feel like Soul Bitches is just something that I wanted to do, and it's kind of like saying, like, there's so many podcasts in the world, right? Like, why is yours different? Or like there's certain topics that are have the conversation about. And I think that there is a place where, like, there could be like a different type of women on different types of groups, and that's, again, like, it's very hard to kind of pinpoint a difference, right? Because
No, I meant
I
in
don't
terms
want,
of audience or like demographic or like age.
yeah, maybe,
That's what I
of
meant,
course,
like
but
objectively. Yeah.
yeah, but like you keep mentioning, you were on Soul Bitches and on
Yeah.
Soul Sisters. So there's so many women who are on Soul Sisters and Soul Bitches,
Yeah.
and I think that there's you. I think that a better person to ask would be maybe an audience member, right? Because, like, again, for me, I look at it in a very different perspective. I look at it in a way that I'm an admin of a group, and how I use it is very different than how you would use it, or how another person would use it. Maybe there are certain questions that you have better answers to on my group versus hers, and vice versa. Maybe they're more education, a different type of education on Soul Sisters. And I think it is important to have these multitudes of group where you feel safe. The problem is, like, keeping that to just the people in the group. If I really had to pinpoint a difference, it's like, we are a private group, and I think, if correct me if I'm wrong, I think Soul Sisters is public, and she's been doing it for far long, and she has, of course, like, handful of experience, and she is the person who started it. So she did give me the idea of starting it.
Right.
So it would be unfair to take that away from somebody. Yes, we are different people. She's the one who started it, and I will never not give her that credit that she did this. And, you know, I wanted to do something similar.
And how was it for you personally? What did the group do for you personally? Did it open any other doors? Did people find out you were behind it? Was there curiosity? Who started it? And how did it change your life?
I wouldn't say it changed my life, because it wasn't meant to change my life. Because, again, like I mentioned, I come from a privileged family. I come from having rights. I come from very different backgrounds than all the women on it. My thing was, how do I change these women's life? How do I make it better? How do I make it maybe their day easier? How do I add value? How do I give them different perspectives, and how we discuss different perspectives, right? I think what's important is how we differ from one another, but have those conversations. And how I used it was, I wanted to be that person with saying that it's okay to have a difference of opinion. That doesn't mean it's not always right or wrong, and it's not always black or white in certain situations. Like, we grow up so differently. Like, my
Right.
background versus your background, or a third person, we all grow up so differently that it's unfair for us to be like, I was taught this, so I am right, and you were taught this, so you were wrong because you weren't taught what I was taught. We're so involved in, like, how our culture is, what's right, what's wrong, and religion is such a big deal back home. It's an Islamic country, so I think that it became a lot about, like, having differences of opinion, but how we shared it. I, of course, tried to mediate it. I, of course, tried to have those conversations, or push boundaries where it's like, yes,
Right.
let's talk about it. Yes,
What were
let's
some
do
of
it.
the
But,
hardest conversations to mediate?
I mean, religion. Everyone has a very specific, not specific, but, like, religion is so hard to talk about. Even right now, like, I'm stumbling on my words when it comes to religion, because there's just so many things that, of course, we can't even say in this podcast, and, like, you can't really say online. And we just kind of had to shut that down for our own safety. Me living in Pakistan, like, obviously, unfortunately, like, safety is your first concern, right? Your safety is one of the biggest things when you start something like this. And when you're seeing certain things, you have to be really careful there. And that was a we tried it, we tested it, but religion is a very, very tough
Did you guys get trolled or any hate?
I mean, of course, like you're always gonna be hated. Like you're
I mean, in
it's
general, not just with the
it,
group, but I wonder, like, if you got backlash.
oh yeah, we've had wars with people online. Like I remember, I'm not gonna name him, but they were just so it was so much. There were like three or four men in who had huge following who called us out and started sharing screenshots from our group. And they thought that was okay to do. I don't know. Like we were fighting tooth and nail, and I remember that's kind of that's the only thing that I discussed with, like, at that point he was I was dating my now husband, and I was just crying because it was just so tired. It was like a daily fight, and I was the face, and
What was the problem?
I think it was just the fact that we were considered the man hating group. They were sharing things that women were sharing, be like, look how easy it is to infiltrate, like women are the ones sending me these screenshots, and like it was hurtful because there were obviously women doing it. It was, I mean, I'm sure maybe a man pretending to be a woman, but there were women doing it. There were women sending screenshots from the group and sending it to this guy. And not this is not the first time it's happened. So it was hurtful in a lot of ways, that you're trying to help people, you're trying to make it better. And obviously, like, I was the admin, so it was not like I can just take a back seat and watch it happen. I had to be involved, and there were people who were tweeting my address, be like, we know you live in X place, like we know. I had to stop using Twitter because I would say something, my brother would say something, and my brother became very popular on Twitter. I don't know if you follow him, but Arham, and he would say the same exact thing. We would test it out, and I would get rape and death threats, and my brother would get like haha.
Just
And it was
pure internalized misogyny, yeah.
Yes, and it just kept happening. Like no matter what I said, is like, we're gonna rape you. Hope you get raped. I wish death upon you and your family. Like things like that, and it was just like, I don't.
It's horrible to read. I mean, we can say all we want that we can block it out, but if you're reading and rereading these things over and over, it just can do something to your brain.
I personally never cared because I was experiencing for so long that, like, I was lucky that I never, like, it like was like whatever. But I think that what happened was, like, it became a safety issue, right? Like when and it does scare you in that way. And that's what happened. I was like, I'm more like worried about my family's safety, not the words that they were saying. But if you're tweeting at me saying, I know where you live and I know where your family lives, and in a place like Pakistan, as a woman, that was scary. Anything could happen to me walking down the street or my family. And I just was like, I don't think this is the best decision to continue what I'm saying on a platform like Twitter.
Right. And did you take any steps, safety measures, while you still lived in Pakistan?
No. I mean, what safety measures can you take? Like, you could be,
I mean, letting your friends know, or like family, not traveling alone.
I mean, my family knew, of course. Like, I worked with my family, like me, my sister Madi, Arha, Maisha, were like a huge close. We were very close. My parents and I are close, and my dad knows that, like, I do soul bitches. Like, it's not like my family doesn't know. So everybody knows, like, what we're doing. Everyone's very supportive, and that's again why I kept mentioning, like, I'm so lucky. Like, I built this with my sister Madi, and she helped me. She opened my eyes to so many things, and she opened my eyes to, like, different perspectives of women. And she's been doing this for so long, and she has a huge background in women's health, and she's one of my inspirations of, like, how educated and how she's helped so many women. Aside from soul bitches, it's not even about it, that she was the only person that I was like, okay, I need you to do this. Without you I can't, and without her I couldn't. And I am where I am with soul bitches because of her, and because, of course, like, my entire team. I do want to mention them, like Shifa, Zainab, Zena, like Homera, like all of these women were just so kind to devote their time two soul bitches, irrespective of what happened. So it's really, it felt like, you were unified in a certain
Right.
way, that you never really felt alone.
Yeah, I mean, my next question was gonna be, how did your family take it? But it seems that they were very supportive and it was not a problem at all. Um, yeah, I was wondering because this is something explosive. It could put you in so much danger. And
Yeah.
also, just running a women's group where the title reads bitches is just like already attracting a lot of negative attention
Right.
in a society like Pakistan. How long after
Right.
did you move out? How long after starting the group did you move out?
I mean, it's been 3 years, so like 3 years ago. So the
Oh,
group was there for 5 years, and then I moved in 2021. I have no
right.
concept of years. Like, when did I
Time
move?
is
But it's
flying. Time is flying.
yeah,
So I
I've
forget
been
as
in
well.
Toronto. Yeah, I've been in Toronto for 3 years, and it kind of shocks me that I've visited Pakistan twice, but I've been here for 3 years, which is, I feel like, quite some time now.
Right. I was wondering how the news traveled that you were behind the group.
I'm not really sure. I mean, I posted on my Facebook status once, and I never marketed it. I never posted my Instagram profile. I never said follow me. I never spoke about soul bitches as such until like I started Instagram maybe the third year in, but I took permission from anybody, and it was not a very active. It was not really about soul bitches. It was here and there, but then it became really hard because I just didn't want that kind of. I think I wanted a different direction, and I wasn't able to do it because I. It just became a point where I just started becoming more and more busy, and so Soul Bitches Instagram wasn't really the priority. It was still like Soul Bitches Facebook and how to keep that better and make it better and have value. So I think that became very hard. And then obviously COVID happened, and COVID spiked internet, right? Like, that is when all you did was talk on it. That's all you did. And it became, so I think a lot of the time it became more of like there was a spike, and then Instagram became the next big thing,
Right.
right? Like, Facebook didn't really matter as much. And Facebook, to be honest, doesn't really matter. Like, without soul bitches, like, I don't really use my Facebook unless it's like my client's Facebook. Nobody really uses Facebook, right? Like, it's like Meta ads, sure. I never marketed it. I never was like, go on Facebook, like, because they couldn't find it. So there was no point of marketing. How do you market something that you can't find? It just had to be word of mouth. There was no way around it. Like, you either had to be a friend of mine, you had to add me on Facebook for me to add you, or you had to have a friend already in it. So it was not something that you could even market. You can't send links out and be like, hey, join my group. It wasn't possible.
You said that you wanted to bring quality to the group and bring value and wanted to focus on making it better. What do you mean by making it better? Like, what were some of the things that you had to do? And what does it mean for a group to be better, like on social media? Because it's basically community driven, right? People
Yeah.
bring their issues, they decide what's the conversation, they decide what they want to talk
Yes.
about.
By better, I meant in terms of like not having people screenshot things. Like, how do I find people? And it's hard, right? You don't know who's screenshotting what. So again, I would rely on the community to come back and be like, hey, but that's where I felt like I lacked, was like constantly speaking about myself, or constantly like being like, oh, this is what I'm doing. But I think that you have to like trust the person in charge, right? If you don't trust the person in charge, then your community doesn't really drive. Like, but I wanted to find a way where it wasn't about me, it wasn't about people who were doing it. And I think it became harder and harder because every time something bad happened or someone didn't believe in what was happening, and it was not like, let's say like an argument happened on the group, we would start getting tagged, and we would have to take a side, and we would have to be like, oh, this is right or this is wrong. But in my head, I'm like, who am I to say what's right and wrong? Who am I to do these things? And it became really like an internal fight, because we were getting bashed constantly, saying that, oh, you guys aren't doing a good enough job. Oh, you guys, like, this is still happening, or this is people are still screenshotting. You need to kick this person out, but you need to do this. And it just, we were being tugged in so many different ways that I think that certain people's emotions would like take over, and it became like sometimes a very hard conversation where people would be insulting one another, right? And you don't want that. That's not what you created this group for. You don't want, you want to have these conversations, and you want to have discussions, and you want to have arguments. Arguments are healthy in certain ways, but you never want to go to a place where people started tearing people down. And in the end, those things started to happen more frequently. I don't know if it was because people were angry more, because of what was happening around us, and like emotions were just so heightened that a lot of people felt like they were being teared down. And I don't blame them, because they were in a lot of ways. People just kept saying, oh, it's my opinion, it's my opinion, it's my opinion. But it's like some opinions can be mean and rude and
hate speech
hurtful
sometimes, yeah.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I don't want to, and I think that when the group comes back, and I hope it does, those are the steps I want to take. I want to eradicate that. And I think that I became so busy with like working, and I want to be honest, and I don't want to be like, oh my God, I did everything in my power. There were certain times where I was tired. There were certain times that I didn't have all the time, and I leaned on my team to go in, and my team was helping me so much while I navigated my life. I'd never lived in Toronto. I was trying to find a job. I was trying to, and of course, like living abroad is never easy. I was without my family. My husband and I both didn't have a job. We were trying to, like, we just got married like 3 months ago. There were just so much happening that, of course, like Soul Bitches stopped becoming the center of my world. And that was hard, because for 6 to 7 years, that was the center of my world. Like, that's all I knew. That's all I did. And I was just so, of course, like caught up that when I took that like step back a little bit, and my sister was helping me, like my team, as I mentioned, that became more of a prominent factor, because everyone gets busy in their life. And then after COVID, it was just like hate speech after hate speech. Then influencers became really big, and then people were hating on our influencers, and people were hating on this, and people were hating on that. And it just became like, sure, like you don't have to like what this influencer is posting. You don't have to like what anyone's posting. But this is not a group where you're like sharing screenshots and posting like, this person is wearing this and it's so ugly, or this, like, it's not,
that is
it
mean.
Gossip. Yeah,
that is so mean.
Yeah, and I felt like even if I personally wouldn't follow an influencer, I would never go comment on their things and be like, this is not funny, or this is so
there's no point personal attacking someone. Like, if you don't have something good to say, don't say it at all.
So, and again, you want to do it in your own life, do it. But that's not what I wanted to bring, and that's not why I created Soul Bitches. So I think that when it like got deleted, I was like, you know what, this, in certain ways, this could be a good thing, because I think people needed that break, and people needed to get off, and people needed that like space to be like, this is not what it was used for. And I think when it comes back, there is more devotion and time, and like I would need to spend on it if it comes back. And that is the only way that I will bring it back. Because right now we have Soul Bitches temporary, which is fine, which is easy. It has like 3,000 women on it, so it's like, it's okay for now. But if that were to ever come back, it would have to be the center of my world for at least a couple of months to bring it back to what it was, and bring it back to like what OG Soul Bitches was. And I think there is that like disparity like right now.
I mean, although I do feel like whether the group comes back or not, and I want to say this because I'm not sure when I'm gonna release this podcast, hopefully soon. I'm gonna prioritize this podcast because it's kind of time sensitive. But I mean, maybe the group comes back and maybe you beat me to it. So I just want to say it for the record. But I think that it's so important to remember that you've already built a community. Like, you've built a brand, basically. Whether you monetize from it or you don't monetize, it's a brand, it's a community. You can take this name anywhere and it will still be your brand and your community, because I feel like enough people know about Soul Bitches. So in a way, I mean, whether the group comes back or not, you're not gonna have to start from scratch. Yeah, of course, you're gonna have to start from scratch if you decide to kind of like start a social club or a book club, for example. Just
Yeah.
saying. But I mean, the brand is there, the credibility is there, you know, the platform is already there. And I feel like Pakistani women or South Asian women, I'm not sure if it was only for Pakistani women. Maybe some Indian women were also on the group. I'm not sure. It's possible because our cultures are so similar. But whoever sees the group and they know the group and they see the brand, they're gonna know it. Like I would know it. Like I wouldn't imagine another Soul Bitches. I would be like, okay, this is probably yours if I saw it somewhere. So just wanted to say that because you've built something. I think it's really great. Like Soul Bitches. I love the name. Um,
Thank you. That's really sweet, and I think that there are different directions that I want to take it on, and I've had a few ideas, but of course it takes time to actually come up with something because I don't think Facebook is the ideal place for it
or
to
the
be
future,
on.
yeah.
So yeah, for the future. So there are things that I'm trying and in my own power and my capacity and like of course like financial means like I this doesn't mean like I would never want to monetize off like the women on it. That's a very huge part. Like it's a very different type of monetization, right? It's not about like I want to push products on them or have like sales on them, but like it's a different type of way. Like I think everything's very different, and I think it is important because the world works on money. You can't do anything without money,
Right.
unfortunately. Like it's just how the world kind of operates. So I think it's how you monetize things and like how you are. And I know a lot of people will be like, oh, like because of Soul Bitches, like you have a following. And sure, but I never told people to follow me. And if you follow me, I post like really random things. Like I obviously have a voice and I speak about certain things, but a lot of people unfollow me because
Yeah.
they don't want to watch what I have to say. So it's very different, and I think that I never took that route where I was like, if you want to follow me because of very different reasons, not because of Soul Bitches. Like those are very different things. Ours Breezy has nothing like my Instagram is not my group. And
Yeah.
because I will never share things that are happening unless with the permission or unless like it was like something that I'm
Yeah.
like
I've never seen it, by the way, and I've been following
and I
you a long time.
I don't do that, and I don't. That's kind of monetization. Like if I want to do a brand deal, I'll do it, but it's nothing to do with. I'm not gonna be like because Soul Bitches and like tie in Soul Bitches. Like I wouldn't do it. I'm doing a brand deal, or I'm working with a brand that morally fits me because I like it because it fits who I am. But I am not Soul Bitches. Like my community is Soul Bitches. My community is
Yeah.
what makes Soul Bitches. Like I help and I facilitate, but I'm not it. Like there's 33,000 women. Like they make it. They are who are bringing the joy. They're bringing the education. They're
Right.
bringing the perspectives. And I feel like it becomes very unfair to be like, I did that when I
Right.
didn't. I created a space and I helped, but those women on it made Soul Bitches
They are the
what
drivers
it
of
is
change
today.
of.
Yeah, they are. I'm one person, and they are the reasons I continue to do it. And it's so uplifting to feel like they believe in Soul Bitches and they
Right.
believe in the purpose and have that, you know, I really want to be on it, a sense of community. And we've helped a lot of women on it. We have sent women to school on it. We have fundraised
Wow.
for people, and we have, and of course, like we're really big on um
Animal care.
animal care. Thank you. And we have partnered with ACF and SAR JK and
Yeah.
JFK and a lot of these like animal shelters where I will never monetize off them. Or there are a lot of groups that people have said, oh, to post this you have to pay me X amount of money. And when we had a huge thing of like I do not, the biggest thing I never allowed was selling pets. It's adopt, don't shop. That was a huge policy on the group. Like we were just, because of how abused animals were, and we really
Especially in
advocated.
Pakistan. Yeah, this is
Exactly.
horrible. The state of animal
Yeah,
rights, it's just.
exactly. So that was a huge thing that I was very big on, that if anything, like post about these animals, like adopt these animals. And I never wanted and of course, like, I wasn't adopting them. The women, the 33,000 women, were the ones helping, were the ones, like, spreading the word. So, like, when people come and be like, you did this, I feel like it's not me. It's like, it's the Soul Bitches community, which is my family, which is why I did what I did for so long. And I never got money off of it, and I still don't to this day. I have as you know, I have a job that requires my complete attention, and that's what I'm doing today. And I never took the route of, like, being like, okay, like, Instagram is where, and I could have, of course I could have, and that's the whole point of marketing. And I know a lot of your questions were, did you ever market it? Which is because I just don't think it is me. And
I
if I
appreciate
ever were to
that.
do it,
I mean, that's why I say you've built a community, and I mean, I see a lot of integrity, because I'm not sure who it was, but somebody asked me once, how do you know Rabeeya? And I was like, I'm not sure. I mean, and then this person asked me something about Soul Bitches. And I was like, that's right. She runs that group. But I mean, we follow each other because we went to school together. And I was like, I totally
yeah.
forgot that. Like, we were in the same class. And that's how I know her. And this is incredible that she built a group. But I don't know her through the group. I just know her because I went to school with her. And there's so little of Soul Bitches on your personal social media accounts. Facebook, I can't comment because, like you said, you don't use it either as much. I don't use it either. It's been 5-6 years I stopped using Facebook as much. But what I do see the part about integrity, and before we close, I want to ask. Of course, this is a community-driven effort. The women on the group decide what they want to talk about. Mm-hmm. But do you think the conversations on the group, the topics, the themes evolved in any way? Like, did people evolve? Did you feel like, as someone looking at the group and running and reading the group, being so exposed, and you said that the group helped a lot of women and it gave them a platform, did you feel like it got better in some ways? Like, the kind of conversations they had, the mindset, the acceptance, the inclusivity?
I think it did. I think a lot of times that it got good and then they were bad. There were phases. I think it's very subjective, because if you think about it, people adapt to the world, right? If, like, you're hearing bad news every day, and if you're in a place where bad things are happening, you're not going to be the happiest person. You're not going to be the most cheerful people. And I think what's happening in the world really dictates sometimes what happens on these forums, because you're obviously discussing real world conversations, or things that are trending, or celebrity gossip. But, like, those are things that are inevitable going to be on it, right? Because that's what is news. That's what categorizes news. And I think that it really became different with COVID, because people were severely depressed. People were going through it. People they loved were dying. Like, that was such a huge part. So obviously the conversations were more heavy and more like a mixture of, like, lightheartedness. But then as you see, like, from where we started to 8 years later, there is that involvement of, like, people do change, and they have these conversations, and, like, they read about it, they learn. And I think that that's what really Soul Bitches did for them, right? Like, there were certain people who never commented or never really liked anything, but they were reading because that's what they felt like that helped them. And I think that when I get these messages about certain things, like, I've been an active user, I've made friends, I've done this, and that's when I actually feel like, oh, it was an impact. It wasn't just me looking at it and being like, oh, I think people have changed, or people have done this.
Yeah.
Having those people come to me, and I know and I'm going to say this, I am so bad at responding to messages and DMs, and my Facebook Messenger has, like, I don't know, 200 unread messages, and my Instagram DM has so many messages. I don't respond to my own friends, and I'm really bad at that, but there are certain times I do read it. And the whole reason I started, like, going back to, like, Facebook and trying to get it back, which, again, I promise you is the biggest pain in the ass. But it was because of those messages and those emails and the constant, like, we really miss Soul Bitches, we really want it back. And even if there were like a few, and maybe, but it felt like those few people were the reason I wanted to bring him back, so they had some comfort in their life, or they had a place where they felt safe. And I'm not saying it because I feel that way. I'm saying it because that's what other people have said to me, and I want to give that back to them. And if that means me doing my best to bring him back, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to try my best.
Right.
And because they've been there for me, and they've created something so great for women.
Do you remember any time when the group just exploded because of something that was happening politically or socially, in Pakistan? Or, for example, Me Too happened. This was a huge opening in Pakistan in 2019. The first case came out between Ali Zafar and Misha Shafi, and this was a huge thing. So something similar that just comes to your mind.
Of course, there were opposing views always. Like, again, can never share content that was shared on the group. There were conversations that happened. There were opposing. Politics is a huge thing that like happened. So of course that was discussed. But I think that what was important is like these conversations happen and they stay there, and people have the right to have different viewpoints. And sometimes, obviously, in certain situations like Me Too movements, there is a right or wrong. There is that very clear distinction of like, whose side are you going to be on in these situations? And I think that really opened our eyes and how to navigate and what to really do and what steps we need to take to actually make the group a safe space and actually implement certain things that we were like, this is our group, this is what we believe in, this is who we're siding with. If you're siding with anybody else, and if you're siding with X party, you cannot be part of something. You are allowing or justifying certain things or certain behaviors.
You're allowing and enabling certain behaviors to persist.
Exactly. Which we will not tolerate. I didn't care who you were. I didn't care if you were my friend at that point. Like, if you are justifying these behaviors and you are enabling it, and other women are reading it and be like, oh, this behavior is okay, or domestic abuse is okay, or any sort of abuse is okay, any sort of sexual assault, rape, any of that, telling women to have kids in a place where she's like, my husband's beating me, or I'm in a domestic violence case, and you're giving your advice and you're saying, hey, have a kid, or certain things that we just had to draw a line somewhere.
It must be a lot to take in, like, to read those things. It's just a lot. Like,
it was, and it still is. It's
exhausting.
I mean, but then you think about it and you're like, you're reading this person's thing and you can't even begin to imagine what that person feels.
They're going
that
through
person feels so alone and so secluded that they can't even talk to. They're anonymously posting on a group.
Right.
To come, you have to be at the lowest of your lows in those situations where you really feel like you have nobody, and then you're getting advice and you're at your lowest of your lows, and you're reading this like, oh, did you do something to upset your husband? You're reading these comments and you're like,
the victim blaming is so outrageous. I hate it. I feel like it's the one thing that just makes me angry the fastest. If somebody's victim blaming, like,
there will be people who victim blame. You live in a world where, of course, you see it online, you see it on Instagram, you see it, you but obviously when you are facilitating, or you're trying to create, like, when I say that make it a better place, these were the things, right? Like, you have to be so sensitive to certain situations. You have to have empathy, and the biggest thing was like, you have to be empathetic. If not unsolicited advice, if the person's not asking for that, you don't need to. You can't be the judge, the jury, and the executioner. Like, you can't do that. And
right.
But of course, in a lot of cases, that those expectations were on our shoulders. Those expectations of like being part mediating in these discussions and like having that, and at a certain point we're like, this is what we believe in as a group, as a community, not my beliefs, as a community. This is how we will move forward as a group. And if you cannot be part of that, and if you're creating an environment where people feel unsafe to discuss certain topics, then you can't be part of that.
Right.
And that's okay. And I think that certain people didn't belong there, in terms of like, it's mean to say, but certain people did create a lot of negative energy and said really mean things and were victim blaming and were siding with abusers. And sorry, not sorry at that point. I don't care. Like, you're not part of that. You're not part of how we want to grow and how we want to evolve. And of course, the first thing you do is try to understand where they're coming from. Try to be like, well, this, and this. But if they're so hell-bent and they're making the other person feel like they did something wrong, which is the victim blaming part of it, then
gaslighting is just so blatant. And I feel like on some issues there are no counter narratives. Harassment, rape, abuse, emotional abuse, and those things. I'm super happy that you have so much integrity. Like, you have the group for the right reasons. You had the group for the right reasons, and you want to get it back up for the right reasons. So that's very impressive.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you for speaking with me.
Of course.